Okay. Good afternoon, Woman Jekka. Welcome everyone to this Australasian Network for Asian Art and RMIT cast talk, Tastes of Justice, the Aesthetics and Politics of Food Art Practices in Asia and Australia, sorry. Edited by Marnie Batten, Stephen Liu, and Frances Willis, and published by Routledge. There's some people joining. If Yes, okay. I'm Dr. Tammy Wong-Holbert. I'm a senior lecturer at RMIT University School of Art and also one of the academic coordinators for AN4AA, our network of researchers that focus on Asian art research in Australia and Aotearoa, New Zealand. First, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Woiwurrung language groups of the Eastern Kulin Nations as the traditional owners of the unceded lands I'm speaking from, and would like to respectfully acknowledge their ancestors and elders, past, present, and emerging, and any First Nations people who are joining us here today. So Tastes of Justice, it's really exciting to be able to present the team behind the Tastes of Justice publication, which has just been published recently. And it's a publication that reveals the diversity of creative and cultural practices in contemporary food art and performances in and between Asia and Australia. It examines the ways in which these engender new frameworks for understanding the sensuous, affective, social, and material dimensions of the alimentary in art. The book presents critical essays and artist contributions, and including themes around enculturation, diaspora, museology, sustainability, activism, and socially engaged art. Sorry, just realized there's more people needing to be admitted. It reworks notions of collaboration, correspondence, and commensality in human and more than human relations. And on that note, I'd like to hand over to one of the editors, Marnie Badham from RMIT University, also my colleague, and Stephen Liu and Frances Maravillas, who are the editors of the book. And they will introduce some of the other speakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Tammy. How does this look?
Yes, this looks great.
Okay. Great. So thanks so much for hosting us, Tammy and crew. The 4N4AA is a really important group to connect thinking across Australian universities, practitioners, and the region, of course. My name's Marnie, and I'm an associate professor here in the School of Art in Melbourne at RMIT University. So, as Tammy said, we're located on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri and the Bunurong peoples. I also give my respect to elders past and present, and recognize their commitment to culture, community, and country from which we all benefit from today. So I want to recognize and thank all of the authors and artists, as well as the editors who contributed to the book. So I've just sort of pasted in here the table of contents to show you the diversity of contributions. There's a number of organizations also that helped us in the development of the book to support unwaged and artist contributions to the book, as well as those that helped us launch the book. This will be our sort of third creative approach to launching. Last year, we had a curated performance program at LaSalle in Singapore late last year. And then early this year, we had an intimate gathering of authors and editors and artists at Magenta House in Redfern, Sydney. You can see here there's a number of logos, but we do want to thank the support of Creative Australia, the International Engagement Program, LaSalle, UNSW, CAST Research Group at RMIT University, and importantly, the Global Art Research Network. It's a global network, and of course, the work of Maddie Colley, who couldn't join us today. She's now in England, so the time zone doesn't work. But as Tammy prefaced, the book and our ongoing curatorial project, The Tastes of Justice, comes from a very generative, creative collaboration across intercultural learning and reciprocal responsibilities and relationships over time and place. Four of us here today first shared iterations of these chapters a few years ago at the AAANZ conference. Frances and I curated a major exhibition of socially engaged food artists and performance artists. Steve and I have collaborated on numerous food performances around Australia and Thailand. So it's exciting to bring all of these voices, perspectives, and practices together. This really is a generative field. The book reads as an eclectic menu of artists, curators, theorists, and historians, with artist perspectives in the form of visual essays, recipes, and case studies. It offers conceptual framings in art and curatorial practice and critical understandings of lived experience. As an artist and researcher and curator myself, my interest here is located in the tensions and sometimes oppositional positioning of both the politics and the aesthetics of food art practices, specifically through collaborative form and artist-led pedagogies. So on the one hand, I'm interested in creative activations, forms of solidarity and resistance, local community and political activism about land sovereignty, food justice, and collective ways of working and survival. We'll hear about some of these strategies from Bakurapan and also Bianca's work. And on the other hand, representing Joella's work and other curators in the book, the contemporary art world, the material, representational, and conceptual strategies of what we put in galleries, collections, or on the stage to represent these concerns, sometimes out of context. So I'll, without further ado, hand over to some of the authors now. First, we have Gatari, pardon me, Gatari and Nisa from Bakurapan Food Study Group. I think they're calling in from Indonesia today. They're a collective of 10 members with diverse backgrounds and interests, exploring food as both subject and a tool to engage with contemporary socio-political issues. In their practice, they combine art, ethnography, and various activities, including performance, installation, and workshops. The group emphasizes the importance of knowledge sharing through writing and publishing. So over to you folks, and I can keep driving if you like.
Yes. Thanks,
Hello.
Marnie.
Thank you, Gatari.
Yeah, so I will start first, then Nisa will continue later. Yeah, the next slide, please. Yeah, so we are from Bakurapan Food Study Group. We called ourselves as a collective. So our main activities is about like we started with the spirit of learning together or studying together about the food, because food is we don't really do the learnings about the only the taste of the food itself, but things about how the food where the food comes from and what's the structure that shaped the food itself, because we believe that what we have on our dining table, it's has a lot of and very complexities, structure and systems that made the food that comes to our dining table. Yeah, next slide. And so we wrote about our second project. We started Bakudapans in 2015, and we started with the first projects that called about the fast food, and the second project is about the please eat wealthily. So we basically the word is really like the questions that comes from us and how we started the project itself, because at that times that's the era where the organic food or organic trend came to our base at the times in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. So many people are having the big discourse and having the new trends about the healthy food and the superfood and organic food. But then one terms came with the words of the wild plants, and we started with the questions about what is the wild plants, and we learned about several lists of the plants, and we started with the how to do the gardenings and grow the wild plants. So that's why we started with the activities of gardening together, even though it failed. The failure is comes because we learned that the plants, the wild plants itself, it's not the plants that can be domesticated, because the words of the wild itself, it's mirroring about their characteristics. Yeah, next. So we have for main what is it, like main spirits of the wild that we found during our projects about the Please Eat Wildly. The first, that the wild plants itself is it's mirroring the spirits of the plants that cannot be domesticated, because they can grow easily everywhere, and they can grow um survive in all seasons in Indonesia. We have 2 seasons, and then but there is a certain regimes in Indonesia between 55 to 98, the dictatorships that led by the Suharto. They had big regulations and policies that control all the foods that grows by the farmer or the people. So yeah, so the previous slides, Marni, sorry. Yeah, so there are some of the plants that the farmers are ruled to only grow the certain of plants, and it's deleting some of the knowledge, the local knowledge that attached to the plants. So people recognize it as some things that are grows wildly. So that's why people are forgetting about what's the plants and how do we can eat that plant. So that's why like many of the knowledge been erased and forgotten along the process of the dictatorships era. And that's why it makes in our generations are really we don't really recognize all the plants that we have besides the plants or the vegetables that comes from the market. Yeah, next slide. Nisa, I will hand to Nisa.
Yes, thank you, Gatari. Yes, in this part, I would like to share about several examples of what Bakudapan have done for the Wild Edibles project, or the Please Eat Widely. As this project spanning across 2 years timeline, we decided to experiment with different learning and research methods. First one, we got invited by OK Video, the Media Art Festival in Jakarta back in 2017. This research, we expand on wild edibles from the perspective of the ex-political prisoner in 1965, especially the women ex-political prisoner, on their daily life and how they utilize wild edibles around the prison area. As the government does not acknowledge on this history until now, therefore we would like to discuss about it through the women and food lenses. By eating together, we it's became our way to invite people, other people like wider audience, to listen the survivor stories from the food we recreated from their experience inside the prison. And then the next one, as you can see on the last screen from your side, hopefully it's on your left. We also collaborate with illustrators, Prihatmo Pomoki from Gegerboyo, and Ayas, and an independent illustrator who used to be part of Bakudapan. From this collaboration with them, we invite them to create illustration from the women's survivor life experience during their prison time, which presented in the exhibition during OK Video. And on your right, it's one of the example I would like to also share. Other than that, we understand that the narration on wild edibles was very limited at that time in 2017, 2016 when we started this. So we thought that we need to conduct a foraging by ourselves to experience it like directly, bodily experience. Therefore, we held several foraging workshops in Jogja. And of course, it's not always a success story, like Gatari mentioned in the beginning. As sometimes we also caught allergy, or some of us got a bit of food poisoning when we tried the plants, because we don't really have the knowledge. We just tried everything and take notes. Um, but it's a nice way to collectively relearning about this knowledge. And then the next one about the process of this project, we decided that this long project, because it's 2 years, should be documented into a publication. We invited other practitioner to participate in the publication making process because we believe that text still holds an important position on how we can distribute the knowledge into wider audience, but also to archive our practices at the same time. And the next one, we also thought about how we can sustain this collective work and our relation with our network, which later become our friends too, until now. Studying together become one of our core practices as a way to get connected with others. And next, lastly, we have also reflection and discussion about sustainability. For us, it's not always about financial aspects. From studying together and experiment with learning and research methods, we understand it as a platform to nourish our minds, shape our practice, and build networks. This project, place it widely, has shaped and pushed us to work, study, and engage critically with food politics in our future projects. So that's all from Bakudapan. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you very much, Gatari and Nisa. I'll invite everybody to put some notes into the chat for our speakers and some questions, and then Tammy can host that dialogue at the end. So I'm taking my screen off so then Bianca can share hers, or sorry, so Joella can share hers. You happy to do that now?
Yeah.
Great. Over to you, Stephen. You're on mute. So this is Stephen Liu, who is on mute. Stephen is one of the authors, editors, and a collaborating curator on the project, as well as an artist who works in food and performance studies.
And you can't remember to turn on his his microphone. So just to say, terima kasih, Gatari Nisa. It's always great to hear your work on food politics. Before I begin, just like to acknowledge that I'm coming in to you from the unceded lands of the Awakabal peoples, and acknowledge their elders past and present. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Joanna Q, who is a curator and formerly a curator at the Singapore Art Museum, and she's currently doing a PhD at Monash University. Don't know whether, Joella, you're in Singapore or in Melbourne.
I am in Singapore, but I'm
You're in-
heading back to Melbourne on Monday.
All right, okay. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you in Australia. And she will be presenting her work on durians, which we first encountered in the Triple NZ conference in 2022, where we did introduce the fruit not only in a conference context in real life, but also bringing it into the institutional context that is the kind of university, which has its own kind of issues. But I'll leave it to you now, Joanna.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. And thanks, Marnie and Francis, for firstly accepting this chapter and also for the AN4AA team for the invite for this talk as well. For today, I just wanted to hopefully open up with a bit of reflection, or at least I think this talk gave me a bit of an opportunity to reflect on, I guess, the process of writing this chapter. It came or it was produced over multiple years of conversations with artists. And instead of also speaking to their work directly, because that's all been done in the chapter, I really wanted to perhaps spend this time to talk a little bit more about the language that I kind of grappled with in the process of writing this chapter. And also then hopefully if there's time at the end, I'll go into a short reading of the conclusion of the chapter that I wrote, just to also perhaps give you a sense of where I landed with this when writing. So my chapter for Taste of Justice examined work by 4 contemporary artists who are based between different cities in the Asia Pacific, and all of whom share an interest in the tropical fruit, durian, as Stephen mentioned, and they've all incorporated depictions of it into their work. So these 4 artists are Tian Baker, Nathan Beard, Khairullah Rahim, and Haider Ismail, who goes by the moniker The Super System. So I wanted to start with, I guess, at the very beginning of why the title of the chapter came to be. And it actually draws from a series of photographs that are in the Singapore Art Museum's collection that document pioneering Singaporean artist Lee Wen's performance of the very same name. So this was made in 2003. And Lee actually performs here with a collection of red lanterns that are stacked one above another in this really pagoda-like structure. And it kind of obliterates most of his body, actually, which has been completely covered with yellow paint. And what you see, for the most part, are his legs. And he's a walking theater, actually, I feel, in this work. And in some of the performance documentation, especially the ones that you see on the right-hand side here, you can really see passers-by who are just like completely bewildered by what they're looking at. But really fundamentally, this work builds on questions and ideas of identity and ethnicity that Lee Wen had begun interrogating through his practice, and particularly this question of what does it mean to perform, or even lean into an exaggerated performance of oneself. The chapter that I produced for Taste of Justice focuses specifically on produce or fruit, and whilst Lee uses his body to call our attention towards how cultural stereotypes function, I was grappling with the language that we would use to describe perhaps an exaggerated performance of certain food and fruit produce. So all because something is constantly visualized and imaged in media doesn't mean that it's understood. I think it became quite clear to me early on in writing this essay that if I wasn't quite careful with the sort of language that I was using, then the language I used might also perpetuate the very caricatures that I was hoping to turn away from. Terms like exotic, for example, which is often used in very close conjunction with fruits from this part of the world, from tropical parts of the world, often are described as exotic. But it also then assumes a certain positionality, because for whom is this fruit particularly exotic? So it was around this point that I came across this book by Kate Bebo. I hope I'm pronouncing her last name right. And her book was titled The Book of Difficult Fruit, Arguments for the Tart, Tender, and Unruly. And she featured fruits from all over the world, things that I wasn't quite familiar with myself, things like aronia, medlar, quince. And she made the case for what she says would be the conventionally unattractive or unfamiliar, and provides helpful ways to cook, dye, or craft with them. And this is a quote that she has actually early on in writing her book, which I will read here. Look, the difficult of difficult fruit is not code for exotic, ethnic, or other. To call a fruit difficult because it is unfamiliar to me and I do not like it would be ridiculous, a failure of imagination, which I thought was quite interesting. And when I dug deeper into it a bit, she did all these interviews with various media outlets when publicizing the book when it came out as well. And it was also then interesting for me to compare that against her chapter within the book on the durian. So despite everything that she said here, she describes the durian as like turpentine, she compares it to motor oil, she compares it to belch. So I found the sort of characterization of the fruit in relation to kind of what she sets up at the beginning quite interesting. And true enough, in reading some of the interviews that she did in publicizing the book, especially one that she did with the Financial Times, the author acknowledged that she had to, and I quote, work hard not to fall into the traps that she was trying to avoid. So I think this was also then brings me to how I was approaching perhaps what might be loosely termed as a methodology for writing and approaching language with this particular essay. So in doing so, I think what really helped me or what really helped anchor the research and the process was really leaning upon the ways and the methods that artists whose works were actually at the center of this essay, how did they actually approach the fruit in their own practice, and perhaps that would be the best way into also then writing about it and finding terms descriptive or evocative or otherwise to then write about them as well. So I've been speaking to these artists for years, and I think also it's been amazing to kind of come back to some of these works time and again. And they all speak about the fruit really fondly and always in relation to the personal. And so I've made quite conscious choices to always open up every sort of sub-segment or subsection of the essay with a bit of an anecdote or a story that the artists themselves have relayed onto me. And they would talk about, their own gustatorial memories of the durian, the way it has been cherished within their families, and also how it's led them to certain social observations as well. So I decided to take their cue and begin with these two coordinates. The first was actually how I usually encounter durians myself. So I don't live in proximity to any durian plantations, having grown up in Singapore, wild or cultivated. And so my encounter with the fruit is commercial as a consumer. And so this is actually a picture that I shared, like I think many, many years ago, but it remains the same. This is a picture of the fruit shop at my house downstairs at the height of the durian season in 4 years ago in 2022. And it still happens like last year, every year is the same. When durian season comes, the durians extend so far out that there's a pawn shop next to this fruit shop, and the half of the pawn shop front is overtaken by the durians because there's just too much of them to contain into the conventional shop front of this fruit store. And I then also realized that perhaps for me, this is also how time punctuates for me year on year. You realize that, okay, it is yet another time where the fruit comes and goes. And it happens with not just durian, but any other fruit that, falls into certain seasonalities as well. The second coordinate was a book by Larissa Lai that I had read also about the same time as I was doing all of this research. And it's a book titled Saltfish Girl. It's a novel that's set in a dystopian future where a corporation by the name of Saturna genetically modifies trees such that those who eat their fruits enjoy better health, increased fertility, and all those sort of biochemical alterations. Yet not every fruit is posited to yield a positive outcome. And so the novel follows the story of two seemingly unconnected female protagonists. One of them, Miranda, goes through life with this persistent odor of durian just hanging low around her. And this is attributed to the fact that her mother gave in to her cravings and consumed some durian before she was conceived, when she was pregnant with Miranda. And so Lai builds these really evocative worlds through the richly textural and sensorial fruit. And in Saltfish Girl, as I would highly recommend everybody read if you would so like, it's a very slim volume, but the durian is both pungent and strange, yet also comforting and incredibly nostalgic as well. And so the author herself draws on these commonly held stereotypes associated with the durian whilst shaping and transforming them towards new meanings. And this is a quote that I really enjoyed while reading the book. It goes, "This is a story about stink, after all, a story about rot, about how life grows out of the most fetid smelling places." So these two coordinates end up bookending the chapter, with Lai's quote actually opening it up, and my reflections on tropical seasonality coming to right at the conclusion of the chapter. And I just want to be mindful of time. Is it okay if I read like maybe a couple of like paragraphs from the book, or are we done for time? Is it okay? Okay. So I'll just read a couple of paragraphs from the final 2 pages of my chapter to conclude. With this chapter, I have proposed that not only should we study equatorial time as a conceivable notion, we can also visualize it as a thick, slippery, and sticky assemblage, a somatic characterization that is not unlike most days in a Southeast Asian city such as Singapore. Though durians are but one such possible device, I believe that they extend themselves to such use due to two main factors. The first might be attributed to the durian's evocative nature. We've discussed how the fruit elicits adverse responses from some. Yet at the other end of the spectrum, many are tantalized by its custard-like flesh and creamy texture. In a recent New York Times article, writer Hannah Beach has this to say about the durian. The durian's flavor elicits passionate and polarizing responses with few indifferent about the fruit's appeal or repulsiveness. The article leaves much to be desired in terms of how it portrays fruits that are indigenous to Southeast Asia and triggered a slew of criticism that described Hannah Beach's perspective as colonial. Articles such as hers encapsulate the absurd contradictions of fruits such as the durian. It divides as much as it gathers, repels as much as it attracts. But yet, the other factor is really the fruit's own ability to punctuate time. As we discussed earlier in a very brief overview of durian in the region, the growth and harvest seasons of durian fall into predictable patterns. In Singapore, durian season tends to start sometime in June and tails off by September each year. During this period, durian sellers hawk the fresh produce in settings that range from large, well-stocked commercial stores to the back of a pickup truck. Sites as these signal the arrival and passing of various seasons within a year, and though, of course, with time, although we've been able to also meld this to our own will with the developments in cultural technologies, I do feel like it is an object incredibly laden with affect, history, and symbolism. The durian will most likely continue to stalk the dreams and capture the imaginations of contemporary artists, both those who are based in Southeast Asia and those who are further afield. While these explorations unfold, my hope is that other ways of passing through time might emerge, new modalities that coexist with and stretch beyond a rehaunting of history, a convergence, an ever-cumulative rush that might never arrive, and a syncopated relay. That's it. Thank you.
Over to you, Francis.
Okay, thank you, Joella, and hello, everyone. My name's Francis. I run the Art Histories and Curatorial Practices program at LaSalle College of the Arts, and I'm also one of the editors and contributors to the book. I just want to briefly say that one of the abiding motif of the book is the role of collective practice and collaboration in enabling ideas and actions through interdependence, reciprocity, presence, and responsibility. And here, thinking and acting collectively involves not just navigating across differences and sharing resources, it also entails building communities of practice centered around communal exchange, eating, and cooking together. You know, communities of practice that seek to evoke new ways of being. Now, Bianca, who will be our next speaker, has contributed a chapter on the Jakarta-based collective Good School, focusing on Good Kitchen, which was presented as part of Documenta 15 in Castle. Bianca Winata Putri is a curator, writer, and researcher based in Indonesia and Australia. She holds a PhD in art history and theory from Monash University's art design and architecture, and her research focuses on contemporary Southeast Asian art and exhibitions from the 1990s through to the present. Take it away, Bianca.
Thanks, Francis. Marnie, I'm really sorry I sent you a message. Am I able to share screen? Just because I have a couple of questions I'd like to pose. Thank you.
Sure. Tammy, is that okay if she shares?
I think it should be no problem.
Yep.
Sure. So instead of the slides that you've sent? Okay, great.
Can you see the share button at the bottom?
Yep, I've got it. All good. Sorry. Just gonna go here. Can you see my slide? Is that coming up? Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you, Francis, Marnie, Stephen, and Tammy for the invitation to contribute to this session. My name is Bianca, and I contributed a chapter titled The Social Kitchen, Art and Collaborative Survival in Indonesia. Francis, although you shared that I wrote a case study on Good School, actually for this presentation, I'll be talking about the second case study that I did for the chapter, which is on Mess 56, Dapur Solidaritas. So I'll share more about this. My research for this chapter actually started in 2020 at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it really began with the question, how do we perform solidarity in the arts in times of crisis? Looking back, I remembered asking this question in 2020, feeling helpless. We were under intense lockdown restrictions in Australia and in many parts of the world, and I was far away from my family members in Indonesia, where the condition was grim. So, according to the World Health Organization, the COVID-19 pandemic took 1,061,000 lives, 161,000 lives in Indonesia alone. So, the priority at the time I remembered was about developing and administering vaccines, providing access to food, and especially for those who have contracted the virus, and even more so in remote areas, and sustaining jobs and income at a time where most businesses have either closed or moved online. So, with all this tension, art or working in the arts seemed far removed from offering a solution to this crisis. And with that, I started to question what art can do in times of crisis and what it means to be in solidarity with our community. Throughout my research, I found many artists and art collectives who have responded to the COVID-19 pandemic in creative ways. They showed that art has the power to bring people together, to rise together, and to be in solidarity with one another. For my presentation today, I will share a case study from my chapter, which focuses on how art collectives responded not only to the pandemic, but also to the ongoing issues of food security and social justice in Indonesia. So, the purpose of art collectives often evolves from changing local conditions and urgencies. Fellow academic Nuraini Juliastuti, who is the co-founder of Kunci Study Forum and Collective in Yogyakarta, argues that, and I quote, the history of the development of independent cultural organizations shows that such organizations often function as fixers or intermediaries that fill gaps in the needs of local communities. So if art collectives are fixers that form to address a particular set of local needs, they must also change with shifting societal conditions and as the initial gaps, problems, and concerns are fixed. Another fellow academic and curator, Berto Tucan, for instance, also remarks that the collective cycle presupposes that a collective's work never ends. Art collectives will continue to morph, a pause for a short while, a clamor next, another brief pause, then back to another clamor. It is not always in one place, it can move places. With this in mind, changing social, political, and environmental issues in Indonesia, such as nationwide food insecurity, can also carry notions of solidarity and collective survival. In May 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, artist collective Mess 56 initiated Dapur Umum Collective, a social kitchen in Yogyakarta where artists come together to cook and share meals with local communities. It is a means of driving collaborative survival, offering what they have, described as a safety net in times of crisis. So while Mess 56 is widely known for their engagement with photography and new media, its values and principles are actually centered on working collaboratively with its immediate communities and networks. The collective have described their practice as creating a space for art, etc. So I guess in this case, the etc. extends the reach and scope of what is considered art beyond works on walls. It situates art as a creator or initiator for space, discussion, and knowledge sharing. In the context of COVID-19, there's also a spirit of what Indonesian literary critic Melanie Budianta has termed as emergency activism, and that is attached and inherited from the political climate of the post-1998 Reformation period. So read alongside the quote I shared earlier from Julia Stuti's concept of fixers, this is useful in illustrating how an emergency could enable new directions for cultural and artistic practices to address local community needs. In the case of Mes 56 Dapur Umum Collective, the communal kitchen addressed an urgent need for access to food and ready-to-eat meals during the pandemic. It offered an infrastructure for support in times of crisis. In Mes 56 2020 statement and promotional materials for Dapur Umum Collective, they wrote, Rapuh bersama, makan bersama, bangkit bersama, which translates to be vulnerable together, eat together, rise together. The first part of the statement demonstrates the feeling across communities during the pandemic. At a time when going out, meeting friends, nongkrong, and hanging out, which is especially integral to Indonesian culture, put everyone in a dangerous position, we were all vulnerable. So the statement, be vulnerable together, thus invites us to acknowledge our shared experience and our interdependencies. For Mes 56, the kitchen became a site for connection and negotiation in confronting the critical question, how will we survive together? Dapur Umum Collective invited members of the public to contribute to and participate in 3 ways. They can share a meal with up to 10 people at Mes 56 communal space. They can donate 10,000 rupiah or around 10 cents 10 cents in Australian, or more towards kitchen ingredients. And they can also contribute time and service by cooking or delivering food to people's homes. They could also contribute fresh ingredients directly to the kitchen. So this practice of donating and free labor reflects the spirit of mutual cooperation, which is so pertinent to the social, cultural, and political fabric of Yogyakarta and Indonesia more broadly. In 2021, the Social Kitchen participated in Biennale Jogja Ecuador 6 Indonesia with Oceania. It collaborated with collectives and communities from East Indonesia, particularly student communities from Lembata, Tidore, and the Tonjo Foundation Collective. And they invited them to cook and share their knowledge on food-related strategies in times of emergency. This approach addressed ongoing and various forms of racism and stereotyping of communities living in Eastern Indonesia, such as indigenous Papuans. In response to this issue, many artists and art collective used the Biennale as a solidarity building platform with artists and communities from East Indonesia. Adapting its COVID-19 format, this iteration of Dapur Umum Collective became a meeting point for cultures, stories, and mutual support, remaining relevant and adaptive to changing times. For the Biennale, Dapur Umum Collective also collaborated with artist Vincentius Ola, nicknamed Ventus, from East Indonesia. Ventus, together with members of Mes 56, visited student housings in Yogyakarta for East Indonesian University students from Lembata, Ende, and Sumba, and invited them to participate in the social kitchen. Together, they developed a menu of everyday meals that the students would cook and consume, as well as meals that reminded them of home. The process of developing the social kitchen's menu was collaborative, aiming to prepare or recreate home-cooked meals through the experiences and perspectives of university students. The menu included fish, particularly ikan laut or fish from the ocean, instead of the more common ikan tawar, so freshwater fish, in Java. And it also included sago and corn, which is more commonly used in East Indonesia. The social kitchen operates as an open process for solidarity to transform how we work together through our shared struggles, vulnerabilities, and values. This case study demonstrates how artist-led care building can offer an alternative, sustainable infrastructure and ecosystem in times of crisis. It also reflects how contemporary art practices are positioned in everyday life and the broader perspectives of survival. So returning to Berta Tukan's statements on the cycle of collectives, he extends that those that continue to survive have kept evolving, like a chameleon, or those that have continued to challenge themselves to change, to challenge themselves to face bigger problems than those they were designed to address. Mes 56 started as a collective to address the need for experimental photography and new media spaces in Yogyakarta, and has, as this case study has examined, transformed during times of change and crisis. The collective became a social kitchen, highlighting interdependence and the important relationship between sustenance and artistic creation. Sustaining collective practice through solidarity is a survival mechanism and strategy evident in the social kitchen initiated by MES 56. So before ending my presentation, I would like to return to the question that prompted my research and writing for this book. How do we perform solidarity in the arts in times of crisis? This question continues to stay with me until today. We can't evade crisis. They will continue to unfold in various degrees and stages of our lives. And at this very moment, this question is at the forefront of what's happening in Papua, as recently exposed in the critical documentary Pesta Babi or Pig Feast, which investigates how the Indonesian government's national strategic projects threaten indigenous land rights and forests in South Papua. The documentary exposes the massive deforestation and ancestral lands to make way for large-scale corporate sugarcane, palm oil, and food estates. And with that, I invite us all to reflect on this question as we continue our practice as artists, curators, art historians, and art practitioners. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Bianca. We are now at the end of the formal part of the talks, but if there's anyone that wants to ask a question, please feel free. You can either pop it on into the chat, or if you want to put your hand up, you can also just speak if you want. Yeah.
I think Bianca's question's a great one to kick us off.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll pose that to Guittari, Joella, and Nisa. How do we perform solidarity in times of crisis from the perspective of an artist, curator, arts researcher? Thoughts?
Yeah, I want to reflect it into Bakudapan's practice, or it can be also my personal practice. Thanks, Bianca, for the presentations. Because basically this question's been floating up into on my minds as well, like quite long, and think about how do we as an art practitioners, how do we can do both between like doing and believing on our own practice, while we are also like part of this constellation societies that facing the actual crisis. And we have one in Bakudapan, we had one sessions, yeah, the sub collective. Maybe later Nisa can add on to add up to these stories that we gathered with several friends, not only Bakudapan, and we do the what is it like a regular meeting every week, and we learn about the how to do the care work for the activist practice. Like for example, we inviting some friends that are that they are the activists, writers, or they are the what is it, community workers, community organizers, and we share about the how do we cope with the feelings of the exhausted while we are doing our own practice. And then the meeting when not really what is it like it happens like quite long, like almost a year. And then even though that we also still end up having like a big homework right now for launching the publications, but we reflected a lot about the how do we can taking care of each other while we are doing and keep believing on our own practice. Because sometimes when we are facing so many things that happen all the times, because we know that the crisis won't stop soon, and it will keep going. But things about how do we can how to not detach from between our practice and the reality or the daily. So that's the main struggles, or like the main struggles that we keep thinking, and how do we keep working on it. Because sometimes if we do the solidarity, like perform the solidarities separated with our practice or separated with our daily. Sometimes it created like what is it, like confusions about how to keep it balanced, but things about how to find the connections through our groups and to find the connections each other. It's quite a lot helps to reflect it and redefine it like every time when it changes.
Absolutely, you can't disconnect
Yeah.
one from the other. Nisa or Joella, have you got thoughts?
Yeah, I think just to add Gatari a little bit, so the group name is the Jawat Merawat, like peers in care. So along with them, we also, I think one of the reflection is to imagine it, the practice as like you're having a marathon. So you need to know your pace, but also to balance it with your like your breath. So the collaboration, the works, it's not only to think that we are in the time of crisis, so the crisis is just for a short term, but in fact the crisis is live with us. So it's around us. Even like now, currently in Indonesia, I think every day is a crisis. Until now, we never know what will happen around us. So, but also to understand that not to make everybody like always on alert, but how to be alert together, but also how to induce that to our own practices in daily life. So I think that's what our concern is like with our practices, at least like in Bakudapan or with our network, with our friends. We always try to like try to see the practice of our daily life. So not to separate what is artistic practices, what is projects, but to connect it with everything. So we can do it like for a longer term, not only for the projects only. I hope that connects everything.
I think actually like what Nisa and Gatari was saying, because everybody like I think responds to this in their own way. And yeah, I think there was a like Mani mentioned, like it's so nice also to be revisiting these case studies that we were all thinking about and these works that we have been making or works that we have been studying closely from a few years ago. But I was really thinking a lot about solidarity as also in terms of what's sustainable for each individual, because what we find ourselves coming up against is always going to be like a long and drawn out journey, whatever that we may be resisting or also wanting to push back against. And so as a curator, I think a lot of what has been quite meaningful is also to push back on cycles of production that are incredibly intense and really sort of transactional as well. And so what's been really helpful to also give, because so much of everyone's practice is also a personal one as well. And so in order to find common ground together, it often also has to be something that is sustainable for us to also continue so that we don't burn out and all of these other things that are associated with with activistic or community or organizing work as well. And so over the past few years, what's been particularly meaningful for me, I think, and also I'm still trying to deepen that engagement with different individuals, but particularly working with artists long term. And I don't mean like months, but like years, like 2 years, 2.5 years, to realize something that might not actually be an artwork, but something that feels right for that particular point in time for their practice, whether that might be a publication, a program, or maybe it's also just enough to allow research to rest as well, a time for rest for each individual, and also to acknowledge that alongside your practice, there are all of these other responsibilities that each individual has as well, whether that be caregiving or just the cycles and rhythms of life. I think that and trying to work a way through that together is also a form of solidarity as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Joella. That was great. There's a few comments in the chat. Rosalia actually says, hi, I am Phila from Yogya. I'm not an art practitioner. I'm a second generation owner of an Indonesian restaurant. And I really appreciate all of your work. And thank you so for making me think about what I can do in my scope of work and be more aware that there is much more to food than its taste. And I've just set up a collaboration for you guys in the comments. And she says she'd love to. And then Mary's got a question. Collective responses in crisis are often perceived as an attack towards the regime. How does art become a bridge connecting people from different backgrounds and socioeconomic levels, but still protecting ourselves? I might hand over to the team to who might want to address that one.
I think I would like to give a bit of my thought, because I think we experience a lot in different projects of Bakudapan. For example, like I presented earlier about the dinner and the exhibition about the 1965 survivors, which actually at the time there was a huge demonstration about the so-called, the government so-called, like there's leftist rising at that time. But then at the same time, we had this exhibition discussing about the 1965 tragedy. But then, because the work itself, it's about food, eating, wild plants. So for others, it didn't look as something that threatened the government. It's not. It's always like in the gray area when we talk about food. Also, the same when we made a board game to criticize. Actually, like if we can say it, we made a board game to criticize the food policies of the previous president, but also until now, still the same. And the board game itself is very like very blunt on making illustration of putting our president faces, criticize directly on the policies, but then it looks not harmful for them. Even like the government saw our board game, they play it, but they was like ha ha ha, they were just laughing. But I think it's fine. I think to one of the reflection with Bakudapan, we always thought that maybe food it's a harmful tools that we can use to attack the government and to organize a community. And that's what happened currently with our projects. We always try to bring people together, to build discussion with them, but with the lenses of using food. So we utilize the moments and also the topics for us to do like community organizing with others through different projects that we initiated.
Great. Thank you, Nisa,
Yeah.
for that response. I'm just paying attention to the time. We've just reached 1 o'clock, and we might actually wrap up the session. And I'd just like to thank all of our guest speakers for so beautifully presenting on your recent publication, and really congratulate you on releasing that. And I'd just like to let you know that, this has been presented by AN4AA and RMIT Cast. And if you want any more information about AN4AA events, you can head to our website, an4aa.org. We have a mailing list. We also have an Instagram account, so you can keep up to date with what's happening. We also are currently organising our AN4AA postgraduate symposium, which is online and in person in hubs in Sydney and Melbourne. And we're calling, our call for papers is actually currently open. So if there's anyone that's interested in presenting at our postgraduate symposium, please do have a look at our website. And on that note, I think I'll finish up, but really grateful for all the people that have attended today, and thank you so much also to all the speakers. See you next time.
Thanks, Tam.
Thanks, Tammy.